Righty-ho. Welcome to March MMM, and we have with us live Donald, Cassandra, Robin and myself, Lena. And today's topics are, we've got a couple of business questions and we're talking about post-op guidelines with Cassandra, and Robin sent us in a chart to have a look at. We also had a little bit of educator news to start off the meeting. We had some fantastic news from our educator in Timaru, Emily, and her partner are very excited to announce that they have had a baby called Star 5 weeks ago, and Emily said it was a little bit earlier than expected due to some complications, but everything is going very well, so big congratulations to Emily and her family. And she sent a picture as well.
Fabulous.
Very cute.
Fabulous.
Is that the actual picture, or did you just find that, Lena?
No, that is the actual picture, and I'm very apologetic. I've forgotten the word to describe it, but Emily said it was quite exciting. It was the first of that type of birth that they've had, or this first or second one they've had in Timaru Hospital, and there's a very special name for it where they keep the umbilical cord intact, and they naturally... what was it called?
They keep it until it stops pumping, don't they? Then they take it off.
Yeah, I googled it. I have to admit I hadn't really heard much about it before, and I think there's a couple of situations. Sometimes they keep it until it stops pulsating, and there's also another situation where you keep it even longer until it sort of naturally withers and parts from the placenta, which I thought was very interesting.
Wow.
Go, Emily.
Cool bananas. So I had a little business question to start the ball rolling tonight for Donald. I've spent quite a bit of time doing some community talks last year, and I have a little slideshow that I've put together which is pretty much the original natural fertility talk that's all laid out for us for the community discussion that goes for about an hour. But I've had some feedback, and I was just wanting to get some ideas. At the moment, my layout for my session starts with kind of like an overview of what natural fertility is and how we work in terms of having a counsellor with educators and that sort of thing. And then it sort of progresses from talking about natural fertility into sort of the captivating stuff on how charting works. And some feedback I had from an interesting business lady last year was she thought I had it laid out around the wrong way. She said it would be better to have started my session with all the exciting discussion about sort of, passionate, what's the usefulness of doing natural fertility and all that sort of thing, and then progress into the discussion about what natural fertility is as an organisation further through the talk.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? What do you think about that?
I think she's absolutely right, because we have to understand why we're listening, and that's about what's the value or what's the excitement, or just we have to get why. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. Now I presume you've invited them to hear your talk, so you don't do the facilitated thing about what do you want to hear today. Although you still could, like a really advanced way to do these presentations could be to bring them together, and you might say something along the lines of, look, I know we're here to talk about natural fertility and Natural Fertility New Zealand. However, just before I start, I'm really interested to hear about from you, what are your questions, what's on your mind? And then you sort of coach them into exactly what you're going to say anyway, but they feel like they're in control. So that's one way. Or the other way to do it is just to make sure you deliver something that helps them explain why, and it's about what's the benefit, what's the compelling reason why they should listen. So I get what you're saying. How do you feel about that, Robin?
Yeah, I like that idea actually. I don't normally do that bit of interaction at the beginning, but actually you don't have to answer their questions, do you? You can just sort of say, what do you want to know, and then go, well, that's brilliant, because within the talk, all of those questions will be answered and we'll come back to specific questions after. So I like that.
Yeah. You just got to have that little segue comment that makes sense. But once you're doing it, it's very easy, because you know pretty well what the questions are going to be. You know pretty well why they're there.
Yeah.
In the past, I've usually started the session. I know I did one community group later on last year. It was Mothers for Mothers group, so it was a breastfeeding group. But the coordinator had a couple of objectives that she wanted me to cover, so I put those up on the whiteboard. But then, exactly what you said, Donald, asked, were there specific questions that people wanted answered or specific topics that they wanted covered within that time frame.
And you can get to the point, because as soon as you put it on the board, you come with an agenda and people don't feel like, they're looking for the catch. Like today I did a whole day with a group from Auckland Council and I had a really good connection with my client partner and she wanted to achieve some things. So I was making sure that I was stretching it as much as I could so that I could get to what she wanted to do without me sort of appearing to guide the conversation at all. Like I wanted the people to feel like they were running it. And there's a time there, it's a stretch because the client partner thinks, well, Donald, when are you going to meet my needs? When are you going to meet my needs? I tell you a classic example happened the first time I spoke to Natural Fertility down at the airport. And lovely Stephanie was compelled to say, Donald, you're running out of time. When are you going to get to the point? And the final 15 minutes was what it felt to me like to be really significant conversation. So that's sort of the two extremes, You can. It's about coaching people to exactly what you want to deliver.
Yeah, I think that sounds really useful. Because I think it's quite easy to lose people at the start, and I do think often you get those looks back. If you don't quite start at the right level, you can get those looks like, oh yeah, so are you selling us something, or?
Yeah. They really don't get it. So you've got to get to the elephant in the room as quickly as possible.
And I think having a very early hook in, for the attendees that are there, and doing something that's actually physical. And like for this Mothers for Mothers group, it was basically I had some statements written on bits of paper and I had a true or false or agree or disagree, and it actually got people up out of their chairs to actually place that piece of paper on the floor, because their babies are moving and things as well, so they want to be moving. And that created a great discussion, which really I probably didn't need to even go through my PowerPoint that I had because we covered all of just in that wee exercise. So I think having something physical to do, Lena, is a really good thing, very early on.
I have started with the quiz that we have a couple of times, and that can be really, get everyone's juices flowing a little bit and get a few questions and thoughts bouncing around.
But even, to get people up and moving, you could put, rather than just asking people to list of 1 to 10 and true or false, actually print them out on some card and hand them around and then get people to physically get up and put whether it's true or whether it's false.
Oh, that's a pretty good idea.
And they have to get up and place it with, if they agree that it's true, and then you can have some dialogue and discussion about that, and if someone disagrees then they can pick it up and move it. So it doesn't always have to be a pen and paper exercise, it can be a physical exercise.
Yeah, I agree, and it just depends on your audience. My objective is always to engage people sort of from a cerebral point of view. I see a lot of physical being quite gratuitous and people can't see the relevance, apart from the fact that we get to move around and circulate our blood. And so, but you're absolutely right, some audiences, that's a really good idea to get some kinesthetic type engagement.
Well, that's my question answered.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really like doing the quiz as well.
Do you do the standard quiz, Robin, or have you invented your own?
There's a couple of questions which are a bit debatable that I've had trouble with, so I've kind of swapped those out for other ones actually, because normally when I deliver a talk it's actually more of a CME type situation and I'm kind of strapped for time as it is. And although I want to provoke conversation and discussion, and I certainly want to captivate my audience from the beginning, I'm not in the environment where I can get people on their feet as much as I might like to, and I'm also not in the environment to have too much sort of you know, different views on each thing. So it just kind of triggers people's imaginations, sort of shows them what I'm going to be talking about, that they might get those questions answered, and we revisit that quiz at the end. So that works really well for me anyway, but then it's normally, as I say, sort of a seated CME type environment.
I just think you have to be aware of the group that you're working with and what the, you know, work within the time constraints, like family planning, teaching there last week. I did exactly the same thing, Robin. It's very time constrained, and you know they quickly did the 1 to 10 exercise, and we revisited it at the end. So.
But then again, if I'm working with a group of year 10s or a group of, you know, well, any school students really, you've got to get them up on their feet, and you've got to have some interactive activities. You know, you have to capture them from the first 10 seconds really. So like Cassandra says, it's you know, it's so open to your audience really.
Yes, you always have to have a few things ready to go so that you can adjust it on the day based on, you know, something that maybe, because often you get there and the audience is a little different than you anticipate, even if you've asked some questions about, you know, numbers and what sort of, or whether there's going to be babies there and that sort of thing. It would be quite handy to have a couple of ideas so you can just tweak it slightly on the day as well.
Absolutely, and chocolate and lollies always work really, really well, I find.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks.
And also another thing is actually not to be too afraid of your audience. I think sometimes as educators we sort of think if we've got an audience of nurses or GPs or doctors that we kind of think that it has to be incredibly formal, but actually, you know, they're just people and they're outside of their work environment, and actually doing something a bit fun, you know, works really well in that environment too, and not to be scared to do that.
And you know, I think that's really important. Actually, I go further than that. You know, an audience wants you to succeed. They want you to excel. And so they're sort of almost rooting for you quietly. And if we don't get that, it's generally because we end up by, you know, the fear we fear, what we fear manifests, you know. So it's, I like what you're saying, Robin. You sort of got to own the space and own the audience, and and I guess that confidence comes with time, practice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question. This is for our wider audience, isn't it, Lena? This is being recorded.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. I want to just, I want you to tell me, we've got some seasoned educators in the room. What's the value of natural fertility understanding? What's the value of it? I mean, how does it benefit people? Can we just go back to some really basics? And you know, I'm a layperson. I'm not even anything to do with the health system. And so I learnt a lot at the last month's MMM, but it was quite technical and quite sort of detailed. I'd really like to hear again just what's the high-level value of natural fertility in New Zealand.
Can I start? My favourite one, because I've got a few favourite values that I think come with it, but my favourite one is, I think, the ability and the learning about your body and understanding how it works. I think that's one of the biggest values, and I think that's the one that people reflect back after they've finished the 3 sessions. Is I can't believe I understand that, you know, there's this cycle, and I know what happens individually to my body, and I know that it's slightly different than might happen to someone else, but I know and understand my cycle and how it might change and how that affects, you know, my body and my fertility and how I might plan my family.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I think flowing on from that, Lena, is also once people have that understanding, then the value, you know, the client's feedback to me is that then they have the ability to make really informed decisions about their fertility. And so whether that is that they want to use it to avoid pregnancy, or whether it is that they want to use it to help them to conceive, or just to manage something like the migraines that they have, or to help them make decisions about getting children in the future because of their polycystic ovaries or the endometriosis. So, you know, I had a client today, and that's specifically what she was talking about. She'd been trained in symptothermal by one of our natural fertility educators 10 plus years ago. So, you know, she was 23, but she said she really didn't have a good handle on it. But now she's at a stage where she wants to come back and revisit that with her fiance and look at understanding her fertility so that they can use it initially to avoid conception, but within the next year conceive, but also have something that they can work together to meeting their own goals.
Cassandra, I think that's such a valid point, and to answer your question from me, Donald, I think that it is incredibly relationship building. If both members of the couple come along, I think that it really does build that relationship, that they find it, both male and female partners find it incredibly empowering and exciting as well, and it's something that they will talk about together, and that they will be able to do as a couple. So it's, you know, it's combined fertility, so it's something that they do together. And I think on the other hand as well, something a little bit more technical, I get a lot of clients who are just coming in for a fertility check. They know that the doctors will say to them, hey, look, if you're under 30, you know, you can just go away and try for a year. And if you're over, then you can go away and try for 6 months. And in fact, people go, well, actually, if I come in and learn about my own fertility over a couple of months, I'll find out at least if there's anything glaringly obvious that isn't going okay, that in fact it would end up being a complete waste of time trying for any amount of time. So it's a very economical, fairly quick way of finding.
Yeah, so I imagine that you're also helping the, particularly women, build their confidence in their intuition, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think we've lost a lot of that. I think especially our generation, and I know you shouldn't generalise, but I think there's a lot of people in our generation that have lost that intuition, or it's just been buried and it takes me a while to dig it back out, but it's rather, I think everyone's very excited when they get back in touch with understanding that.
Fabulous.
And you have to teach it. You have to teach it to people, and it's about body literacy.
So going back in former times, so would this normally have been what mothers did for daughters?
I don't know if they ever did, actually, but I think they could.
Yeah, interesting, yeah.
Maybe in some families where there's been that knowledge, there's not been that knowledge for quite a long time in some families probably.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, and sometimes actually as well I hear that, oh, isn't that a church thing? Isn't that a Catholic thing? And that in fact, perhaps in certain types of families that come from that kind of background, that yes, it has been there for a number of years and it is passed down. But now it's that exciting realization that actually this is a scientific thing that you can pass down no matter what your persuasion in terms of religion, culture, you know, family values. So that's exciting.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, well done. I imagine that that sort of thing is really valuable, particularly to young educators. From my point of view, I'm just really interested in ideas that we can make the value of what we do more visible, more people get to know about it.
That's a great question.
That's a very good question. Does anyone have anything to say, to add to that, or any other questions?
I got another question. And once again, it's from a very lay point of view. You know, am I hearing more younger women talking about the problems of endometriosis than there used to be? Or am I just more aware of it now?
yay that you're more aware of it. That in itself shows the amount of publicity that's coming from, particularly Endometriosis New Zealand, and that's fabulous because I think, Cassandra, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it up at the moment about a 7-year diagnostic?
Yes. Yep, so it's been reduced from 10 years to 7 years, and I think, you know, you're right, Robin, all the education that the ME program is doing in all these high schools around the country, I think, is making young women more aware, and instead of their GPs just saying, well, you know, we need to wait a few years until their cycles, you know, regulate and all this kind of thing, that they're actually, I think, young women are being more assertive and saying, well, actually, no, I know this information and I know that this isn't right and I need this investigated.
And in fact, I think we as a company, NFNZ, accredit people to teach puberty education at year 5, 6 and year 7, 8, and also teach fertility awareness at older year groups in schools. And I think that perhaps we need to revisit some of our criteria of what must be covered and actually get some advice from the ME program run by Endometriosis New Zealand and include it only needs to be a little segment and nothing scary, but some information within our programs, because I know I certainly do within mine, so that even at the parents' evening and also when I speak with the girls, just, you know, this is normal, if you're experiencing this, go have a chat with someone you can trust and maybe talk to a family doctor about it, because that's not within the realms of normal. So, you know, you can be more specific as to why you're saying that at the parents' evening. You can quote the 7 years diagnosis sort of thing, and with the girls, less scary, but definitely letting them know that they're empowered to say, hey, this isn't quite right.
That's a really good point.
And certainly having some of the resources available at that parents' night, you know, that parents can actually pick up and take away with them and then share with their daughters. And yeah,
that's a really good point, actually. Thank you. I'll take that on board. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. I'm just interested, you know, it's triggered my interest in it. It's, well, you know, what is going on? Why is it? Because I'm interested in why, and I'm interested in how our modern lifestyle is affecting it. So I'm going to make some inquiries.
Well, I think there's always a little bit of uncertainty as to whether
PowerPoint presentations. It has a study, Donald, that was done back in the late 80s and repeated again in the late 90s at one of the fertility clinics up in Auckland. And you know, in the pie graph of why these women were coming to the tertiary fertility clinics, it was only a small, very small study, about 88 women, and they were asked as to why they thought what the cause of their infertility was. And it was only a very small sliver of people identified as having endometriosis and that being the reason for their infertility. I'm sure if some money was poured in and that study was repeated again, it would now find that that sliver was quite a big segment. And I'm not sure, Robin, you know, working in a tertiary fertility, you know, centre, you know, what the percentage or what the stats might be.
I'm not sure of the stats exactly, but certainly on a day-to-day level, I see plenty of people coming in with endometriosis as their reason for infertility, for sure.
Yeah.
And is it true that it's a little bit difficult to know exactly what percentage is due to the increased understanding and awareness that this pain's not normal and it could be endometriosis versus whether there is an increased rate of endometriosis actually occurring? Is that correct? It's a little bit difficult to tell?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, that's what I've deduced.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, we have hit 8 o'clock, so if no one has any further questions or anything they'd like to add there, or does anyone?
Should I give you a little bit of background on the patient? Patient, client?
Client, thanks.
Okay. Okay, client, yes, sorry about that. Right, yes, so she is a 33-year-old woman and her partner is 37. They are both working full-time, and they are relatively healthy. They are particularly interested in endurance competitions and sports, for example, Ironman, Coast to Coast, etc. Neither of them are smokers. She has, really not very, nothing to report in terms of her medical status. Her menstrual cycle is normally fairly regular, around 30 days, and she has had no previous pregnancies. He has fathered no children or has no recorded pregnancies in his past history from previous partners. And in fact, this couple have been trying to conceive since April of 2014. And what else can I tell you? They wanted to come and record their cycles. Sorry?
I just want to know if this was her first recorded cycle.
No, it isn't actually. This is her latest cycle, and I have half a cycle from her first cycle. So she started recording her symptothermal method from partway through from the first appointment, and then she had a second cycle through December, which was a let me see,
So this is about her third.
So this was a 29-day cycle, and it was biphasic, and she was recording fairly well, and there were no issues that were outstanding from that cycle. She was just going on. This is the one that she presented with at her third appointment.
Is all my information I've put up there for everyone?
Oh, and the other additional thing was that she'd actually let me know that she was training for an Ironman competition during this cycle. And we had some discussion about excessive exercise, and they both have average weight to height, BMI. However, she is extremely fit and was training very hard.
So, Rob,
Sorry, I missed that.
analysis of the chart.
Cassandra, I can't really hear you. You're really far away.
What's your analysis of the chart?
Oh, okay. So, Lena, can I just ask a quick question? Do you want me to point out ovulation guidelines post-ovulatory, or do you want me to just basically talk about this chart as it is, a TTC?
Just talk about it how it is as a trying to conceive chart, and then if we have time at the end, we can just use it for the purposes of post-ov guidelines.
Lovely. Okay. So my analysis of this chart is that it's obviously ongoing, and so longer than she would expect. She was utterly convinced that she wasn't getting her period because she was training really hard, and I suspect very much that she's had quite a late ovulation in this cycle because of that training. But I'm also counting a fair few temperatures in the second part of the biphasic cycle. So she's actually gone ahead and done a urine pregnancy test at this stage. So I have looked at the chart with her, and she's been able to see that even though she had a real interruption from day 16 through to day 26 of not recording her mucus and sensation, which was clearly a really important time for her to be observing that, to see if there was any change. You can see that she's having some building fertility in that description of her mucus, and then when she comes back to recording it on day 26, you can see that it says on that first day of recording that it's thicker, but still clear and thin, and then it goes on, and it's really difficult to interpret from looking at her mucus and sensation. To be fair, in previous cycles she's recorded much more clearly than this. You can see from the temperature that she clearly has a biphasic cycle. My only discussion really was if you were using this for a contraceptive client, so she was avoiding conception, and you were using the guidelines post-ovulatory well, then in my opinion you would label the first rise in temperature on day 27 of her cycle. Day 28, 29 is 1, 2, 3. Looking back, then you have 6 temperatures which are all lower than those 3 heightened temperatures. However, if you look at when she'd had intercourse, that was actually on that day of the raised temperature, and it could have been conception from that point. Or if you look forward and see that actually, if you take out day 15, day 16 and day 20, you'll actually see a group of lower temperatures that then rises on day 22. And so if you count day 22 of her cycle, day 23 and day 24 as being 3 temperatures higher than the previous 6 minus those 3 that were high for whatever reason, then you could suspect that ovulation actually happened between day 21 and day 22 of her cycle, which would actually still be late for her to ovulate in a cycle, but she was training super hard and had changed her diet. And that makes it more relevant as well if you look at when the intercourse was, considering that from day 20 back through to virtually day 11 they were having intercourse on a daily evening basis. So either way, yes, the urine test was positive. She is pregnant, and that's a happy thing, which is marvellous for them. And really my advice to her was to find a lead maternity carer. We talked about some other bits and pieces to do with prenatal care, and just to bear in her mind that what will generally happen in the medical population once she is engaged with either an obstetrician or a midwife is that they'll go from her last menstrual period date, which is the 11th of January, for her expected day of delivery, which takes her to mid-October, sort of 11th of October. However, if she did actually ovulate a week later, then realistically when she gets to term and she's told, right, you're allowed to go 2 weeks overdue, well, she may actually be a week less pregnant than what actually the GP will go on using the LMP.
Yep.
So that's my assessment of her I would also love her to join them up, but she never does.
It gives me panic attacks. I always have to take a few deep breaths if someone hasn't joined the dots together.
I always join the dots and I Skype it back to her with them all joined up, and she goes, oh, that's great, but then she doesn't remember. But anyway, she's got lots on her plate. So anyway, they're very happy.
So what was the day you thought she had ovulation was confirmed on, Robin?
Well, actually, I'd like Cassandra's opinion on what I've just said, because I see that there's 2 possible times. And as I said, if I was using this as a avoiding conception chart and sticking really safe and going with the absolute guidelines, then I would say that you're counting 1, 2, 3 from day 27, 28, 29 as 1, 2, 3 on this cycle, if you see what I mean. Looking at 6 temperatures being lower than those 3, dating from day of the cycle 21 through to 26, and then the first raised temperature being on day 27, continued raised temperature on 28 and 29. So ovulation happening between day 26 and 27. If I was talking to someone who was learning and who wanted the guidelines specifically and who was avoiding conception, that's what I would say for safety's sake, because of course you're really missing a lot of the really important mucus and sensation guidelines to be able to double check it. So that's what I would say for safety. Cassandra, would you agree with that?
I'm not going to comment yet because I want to hear what Nina's got to say.
Okay.
Oh, don't do that.
However, in this particular chart, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter anyway. But if I was looking at it in hindsight, I would be inclined to perhaps eliminate day 15, day 16 and day 20 and actually say that ovulation happened somewhere between day 21 and day 22, and that in fact that was the beginning of her raised temperature. Sustained raised temperature was day 22 to day 23, and day 24 is 1, 2, 3. And that fits better.
So sorry, just to confirm, what was the reason you eliminated?
And if you look at most of the temperatures,
go ahead.
So, I mean, if you took those three out, then you've actually got a group of temperatures that fit in one, and that you're looking at your biphasic cycle very accurately then. I mean, you know, she just couldn't remember, you know, sometimes she'd taken the temperature after she'd actually got up and gone for a wee, all these bits and pieces. So without her being able to recall it, you know, it really doesn't matter anyway, but just in looking at when they'd actually had intercourse, it probably, if you look at day 27 being the first raised temperature, having intercourse that evening would probably have actually been too late for that cycle. So realistically, you're looking at her having conceived from having intercourse on either the 17th, 18th, 19th or 20th, bearing in mind that the sperm can survive for 5 to 7 days in a fertile environment. And you can see that there's a biphasic cycle with removing those three temperatures. So, I mean, you know how you can do it with your guidelines. You can actually count more than 6, or you can count more than 3 to incorporate a temperature that doesn't make sense. So that's how you do it, in my opinion, for someone who's TTC, if you're looking at where conception happened.
What do you think, Lena?
Well, when I first looked at the chart, without the information that she might have had some sketchy temperatures, I put, let's see if I can highlight it on this. I put, where are we up to 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. I went first raised temperature on day 24, 25, and then I missed day 26 and put the third raised temperature on day 27.
Mm-hmm. What are the components of the necessary components of the symptothermal method?
Mucus, temperature, sensation.
Yeah.
Maybe the cervix, but it's so patchy with the mucus. She seems to have quite a fertile patch up to day 16. She's even got a medium amount on day 16. It's just that she didn't record it on 17 onwards, isn't it, Robin? There wasn't no mucus. Or did she tend just to record when she
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky cycle, I think. There's just nothing there that's just recorded at all.
So Lena's question is, are the gaps there because there was nothing to record, or just the client didn't record?
No, the client didn't record.
Yeah. So I'm interested in the, you know, there's still fertile mucus, you know, appearing further on down the cycle. Is that day 26, 27, 28, 29? You know, she's written, she's still seeing clear, thin, medium, which is no different to clear, thin, medium that she was seeing on day 16 of the cycle. So it would have been interesting if she had charted all the way through there to see if there'd been a change. But symptothermal, really important to look at the 3 dimensions. So what's going on with the mucus, what's going on with the sensation, and how does that line up with the with ovulation as well. Robin, can you tell us, in her previous chart, which was biphasic, did those signs of fertility marry up really well? Were they in sync?
No, she recorded all the way through clear, thin, medium. And then later, very late towards her period, she said clear, thin, little. But she did record sensation well. So she recorded query, 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 but then she knew when she was realizing that it was wet, and so she recorded that very clearly, but then she stopped recording the sensation after that. So she just wrote the 2 days that she knew that it was different and it was wet, and that's all she could manage really with the sensation. But the whole clear, thin, little is just what she has most of the time, and occasionally it's clear, thin, moderate.
So what would you say your peak feature was like? Or does she have one?
Well, it's hard to say from the actual her particular description of me, because she was still working on sort of gauging a difference from day to day. She was really much more familiar with what the sensation meant for her, so that's what she put was different. So it's, yeah, it's a difficult one because it's not something that she was just practicing it. You can see that at the beginning of this cycle that we've got in front of us. She was trying to be a little bit more specific, but she was, you know, she's finding that either she doesn't get anything at all, or, you know, it's a very similar description all the time.
But she does have a change, you know, she's written on day 30, little and cream, which is very thin.
Is it normal for you to be, you know how we discuss, and we've got the wee picture we show people about the less fertile mucus has the little fibrin, strands of fibrin make like the kind of crosshead pattern if you were to look at the mucus under the microscope. Is it quite, shouldn't, if you do a really good investigation of the mucus, shouldn't you be able to see little fibrin flakes or something to sort of tell the difference between fertile and infertile? I just wonder if people were, sorry, do you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if people skim over it a little bit and don't spend enough time. Maybe it's worthwhile directing them to one of those YouTube clips or something so that they can just gauge it a little bit more closely, because I would have thought it was that you could see the fibrin, or is that not, does everyone not see the fibrin flakes?
I've never heard a client talk about it.
I think that might have been a bit complicated. Yeah, I mean, Cassandra, you're absolutely right. There was that change on day 30 of the cycle where she specifically said little and cream. And even when she comes back to recording, it's thicker and little before it gets clear and little and thin again. And so if you're doing it off that, then you could always count from there, which you'd count that her most fertile day, I guess, was day 29.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really fit in with the temperatures there. But I mean, you go with the latest. So are we, that's what I was saying. Are we talking post-ovulatory guidelines for someone who is, you know, to avoid conception?
Well, that's the only client that it relates to, avoiding conception. But
so I mean, in that regard, I guess you could say that you're counting 1, 2, 3 from where you see the most fertile mucus of the cycle, day 29. You count 1, 2, 3, day 30, 31, 32, and it's the later of the two things. So even though the temperature rise was clearly before that, that's ignored because you're a later one. So you draw your line down the column of day 32 of the cycle.
Yeah. So it almost makes the whole temperature thing, you know, kind of, it doesn't matter where you pinpoint it, because the mucus sensation comes last, the change, you have to take notice of it. Yeah. What do you think, Lena?
I still like where I put the ovulation on. And I don't know, I'm still a little bit sceptical about the mucus recordings. I'm not completely confident that the clear medium thins, I don't know. Is it possible when you get pregnant, does that, you wouldn't have fertile patches of mucus? Or would the progesterone mean it should be technically less fertile looking? Like the
It's
picture
irrelevant,
version, you just
really,
put
isn't it? I mean, if you're looking at this client as a contraceptive client, you've got to go with safety, don't you? And so my initial answer was incorrect if you're looking at it like that. If you're looking at it like that, as Cassandra said, it's symptothermal method, and we all know that we have to look at the mucus and sensation, and we look at the temperature, and it's whichever one comes last post-ovulatory. So if you're looking at this chart as a contraceptive client, you're looking at fertile mucus all the way through to and including day 29 of the cycle, and then you're seeing mucus that isn't as fertile. So you're going to count the last day of fertility as day 29 and count 1, 2, 3, day 30, 31, 32. You look at the temperature, that actually wherever you put the rise, whatever argument it is, comes before that, so you've got to focus on the latter of the two, so you draw your line down the middle of day 32.
So if this client was an avoiding client, are they safe to take the course on the evening of day 32, or do they have to wait till the next day?
They should be good the evening of day 32.
Yep.
What if
I just asked that question that comes through from the client, so you can get a little bit confused about are they good to go that night, or they to wait till the next day.
Yeah, so they're good to go that night.
Robin, what was
Actually,
her...
that's funny because all my stress about the temperatures is actually, in terms of this being a post-ovulatory to avoid client, is actually null and void because, of course, the mucus comes later, so it doesn't matter.
Well done.
it doesn't have
Yeah,
much
but
question of when they would have conceived
I mean, I
it.
guess there's too much concentration into it because she's actually a TTC client and she's pregnant, which is marvellous. But it was interesting because I was she wanted to know exactly when she conceived because she knew that she'd been training hard and that her cycle was longer than it would normally be. So that was quite interesting because I was trying to pinpoint for her when she possibly could have actually conceived. Which is potentially later in the cycle than what even I decided, was potentially actually later than that. And in fact, it could have been from that intercourse that happened on the day 27 of her cycle.
I think so.
Is that what you think?
Yeah, so she's probably not quite as pregnant, which I told her, but she's probably not quite as pregnant as what I thought she was, so yeah.
Well, what was her luteal length in her biphasic charts?
So I've only really got two before that, and one of them was only partial, and she was in the luteal phase of her cycle, so I don't know for how long she'd been in that luteal phase before I started looking at the chart. But the latest one, her luteal phase was, where are we? Was 16 days. And the one before that was luteal phase was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It was 15, so I suspect she hadn't been in that luteal phase very long.
Sometimes what you can do is, when you're looking at a chart like this, if you're unsure where ovulation has occurred and you know what the previous cycle luteal lengths were, is that you can do a count back. And like, if you look at her chart, it's not a typical triphasic chart, but it is, you know, you can see the general range of 3 kind of levels of temperatures. I'm just thinking if we can work that out. And she missed it.
You can see actually a distinct differences on day 15 or 16, can't you? So if she was, yeah, all right. So.
Did you say her last cycle was 33 days? Or 29? 29.
So we said that ovulation was occurred on, you know, we had our first high temperature on day 27. Then I counted 15 days after that, and then we've got a gap, and then we've got another rise. So that would actually fit really well.
Why wouldn't, I understand why you'd put the mucus change on day 30, 31 and 32, but how come you wouldn't put the temperature change further back? What was it you went with day 27?
Well, just when we're talking about before, that if we looked at 27, 28 and 29 as the first 3 high temperatures, knowing what her previous luteal length, which was 15 or 16 days, if you counted 15 or 16 days from day 27,
does bring you to that next rise in temperature, doesn't it?
yeah, because around about 20% of women will have a triphasic chart if they're pregnant.
So do you usually go up to the next temperature bracket when your luteal phase would have ended?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So, if a client brought this chart in to me, I'd look at that if they were to conceive and think, well, they're pregnant without even doing a pregnancy test. But I'd make sure that I let that, that was client discovered, not that I actually told them that. So that's just a wee trick that you can do anyway. If you're a little bit unsure about maybe where ovulation has occurred, if you know what a previous luteal length was, you do a wee bit of a count back.
So is that where you're putting the 3 temperatures then? I got that right, 27, 28, 29. That's the consensus for the temperatures, and then the mucus. Little crane there. So post-of guidelines, say from the evening of day 32.
Yeah.
And I think, Lena, you've raised some good points in regards to, where you get, you talked about potentially there being ovulation on day, just enlarging my screen, that's all. What day did you say?
Well, I put day 24, 25, then I jumped a day and put the 3rd high temperature on day 27, because you can jump a day, can't you?
That's right, yep. So just for the purpose of this, this recording, that just reminding people that you don't have to start the count again, that, you can go count 1, 2, leave out the next one and then pick up the next temperature after that. And it's the same if you're counting backwards, so 3 temperatures higher than the previous 6. If you suddenly had one that kind of was above the baseline of temperatures, you discount it and then just pick up the next temperature. That's a common question from the clients, and certainly the lady that I saw today brought in 3 charts where she'd just been charting your temperature only, and that was her question. Well, it looks like I've got a couple of temperature rises here, but then it dips down and then it jumps back up again. Do I have to start recounting? And no, you don't. And then the other question that came up today was, how much of a jump does it have to be? Does it have to be, she was seeing in a previous chart like a 0.4 degree temperature jump, but then this latest one was only 0.2. So she said, well, that's not a big enough rise, so that can't be ovulation. So just talking to her about the fact that, there are lots of guidelines around the world as to how to establish, which temperature actually indicates ovulation, but the guidelines that we use are really simplistic. And the fact that we look for 3 temperatures which are higher than the previous 6, and we look at a sustained temperature rise. So we're not really interested if it's 0.2 or a 0.2 shift over 3 days or any of those kind of complex calculations.
That was a really good chart, Robin. Really good.
An interesting one.
It was very interesting. And I think quite realistic of what you see with the mucus and the sensation sometimes, as much as you teach people to do it, occasionally they're very busy and you just get sort of slightly more minimalist information.
Yeah, and I think just as a little point to anyone that is listening to this recording after the event, some of the points that I've taken out of it are that with a client who is trying to conceive and they've clearly conceived and it's not the be-all and end-all at that moment in terms of safety, you can tell them, and I did tell them that, you know, if I get the opportunity I will anonymously take their chart to this conference call and get some further information. But obviously, if the client is an avoiding client, then you always on the side of caution, and you will actually even potentially say to them, actually, before I give you a definitive answer on this, I'm going to take this to conference and get some other opinions from senior educators on it.
They're really good points.
And that it's okay to do that.
I think the other interesting thing about this chart is when you raised a question about maybe that intercourse in day 27? It's a bit blurry on my screen to read.
Day 27 there was intercourse?
Yeah, day 27 intercourse. So you're a bit worried about that potentially being a bit late. But who's to say that you know, she didn't release 2 eggs in that cycle?
True that.
Possible.
So, you know, they're not instantaneously you know, released. There can be a delay. So it might have been that their intercourse picked up a second viable egg.
Very, very good point. We could just keep talking for ages about this chart, I think. But if no one's got any more questions that they just have to ask before we wrap this up, then I think we will have to wrap this up, or it's probably going to take a long time to turn the recording into a video for everyone. Any more questions that someone just has to ask? No? No one's bursting? Well, we will bring this to the end, and just to, and I think everyone would agree, it's certainly a fantastic experience, like Robin was saying, being able to bring a chart from a client along and be able to have that discussion about it, and it's fantastic to be here live so that you can ask those questions as you go and have the conversation about it. I think you'd both agree it's well worth coming along if you can squeeze it in.
Definitely.
As much fun as I'm sure it is to listen to us in the next few days. So, our next MMM meeting will be on the 16th of April, which is a Thursday evening at 7:30, and we'll be sending out some information about the next topic, and make sure you email myself any charts, or you can also pop them through to Cassandra that you want to discuss for the next meeting, and we look forward to seeing everyone there, and thank you everyone for joining us live, and thank you very much Donald for bringing up so many good business questions and answering our questions as well.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
Thanks, Cassandra. Thanks, Nina.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Cassandra. Thanks, Robin. Bye.
Bye-bye.